would you deal with a crisis, Mark Saxby?
Well, I think the first thing when it comes to being involving a crisis on social media is understanding the platforms that your business is on, or even the platforms your business isn't on. One of the biggest things I used to hear a few years ago, less so now, is that people would say to me, "Oh, I'm not on social media because if my business goes on social media, then people will be able to say bad things about it." Well, I'd say to them, the trouble is they're already saying bad things about it. You just have no idea because you're not on social media. And then I'd go on social media and I'd find all these people criticizing their company. Then they'd scream and they'd be on social media before you could say Jack Robinson. But the trouble was that wasn't really the whole answer either, because you've got to really understand how these networks work. Because if you're suddenly, there's a for instance, again, Twitter, I would say Twitter's one of the most it's not a very intuitive network to use well. In fact, I would say out of the training workshops we do on Twitter, there's a particular question I ask at the start about how Twitter works. And I would say that out of every 100 people I've asked this question to, maybe one of them has known the answer. And it's a really integral part of Twitter. So if you don't understand Twitter or understand how to use Instagram and how to use Facebook and all that sort of stuff, you shouldn't really be on there. Unless it's happening properly. Because the trouble is, if somebody puts something on there and it goes wrong and you don't know how to actually get rid of it, or you don't know how to handle it. So again, I remember a hotel owner calling us and saying, I'm having all these complaints on social media, on Facebook. Can I delete all the comments? Well, the trouble is that Facebook's not as easy as that, and you cause all sorts of other storms if you then start deleting things. So how do you know? Do you know how to hide a comment on Facebook? Do you know what it means when you hide a comment on Facebook? If you delete a comment, are you prepared for the repercussions of deleting a comment? At the moment we can see if somebody puts out a comment on social media and it gets deleted by a company, straight away people jump even more on that company because they see it as being Big Brotherish. There's some really interesting stats about how if somebody complains to you, how if you don't respond within 24 hours, they're again even more likely to go on and complain on the same network. And then if you still don't respond, they'll then complain on another network. So things start rolling and rolling and rolling. So do you know how to get a direct message, get somebody to direct message you quicker on Twitter? Do you understand the fact that on Twitter you can actually allow yourself to be direct messaged by people who don't follow you, to avoid people complaining in a public forum? So all these things really, really important. So I would say if you're on social media, or even if you're not, it's like, again, with parents, we go into schools and teach young people how to use social media properly. And sometimes parents will say, "Oh, I don't really understand social media, so I'm not bothered about it, I'm not going on it." And I say, you've got to understand it to understand what your children are up to. And it's the same as business owners. So then if you understand it properly, then you know then how to respond in the right sort of way. And there is no one size fits all in terms of this. And a lot of the good principles that Louise has talked about, they very much go over onto social media. But often I think with social media, timeliness is the most important thing. You've got to be quick before it gets out of control. We were working for a car parking company, a national car parking company, and as we were about to start working with them, we were talking about some issues that happened in the past. So we were helping them with their customer service on social media, and they said one day, they said we had a flurry of activity. All these people were tweeting about us. And we didn't understand why, and they're all abusive, and they're all from teenagers. We didn't know what was going on. So we looked, and then one of the team, who was a bit younger, went onto Twitter and found that somebody called Nathan Sykes had complained about them. Anybody want to wave if they've heard the name Nathan Sykes before? No, you're old. Ross, well done, Ross. So the trouble is with Nathan Sykes. Nathan was in a band called The Wanted, which some of you may remember. And when Nathan complained about the fact that our car parking company was charging nurses for parking in hospitals, unfortunately nobody recognized that it was Nathan Sykes. Nobody looked at his Twitter account. Nobody saw that he had hundreds of thousands of followers, and so nobody did anything about it. Now, when we took over their customer service on Twitter, we had a very similar incident a few months after we started, where Warwick Davis, the actor from what's he was in lots of things, names, nothing comes to mind at the minute, but he tweeted about how he'd been given a ticket somewhere, and he complained about it and said how outrageous it was. It may even have been in a hospital, I can't remember. And what the good thing was because we were monitoring their Twitter account, we saw really quickly that Warwick had complained. So we jumped on there as the company and said, sorry to hear that, Warwick. Send us we'll direct message you so you can get the details and get it all sorted out. So what happened then was Warwick's tweet was at the top of the Twitter feed. The second one down was our one, because he'd mentioned us in the tweet, because we'd responded, because then people liked our response. They then liked our response, which bumped it higher than all the other complainants, all saying how outrageous it was. Because then when people then looked at that tweet of Warwick's, and of course people love a good complaint story, don't they? So they looked at the responses, and then they saw that we'd responded positively, and the whole thing died down really, really quickly, and we had nowhere near as many issues as what we could have done. So really important to respond quickly. Understand who's making the complaint, obviously we understood Warwick, and then take advice from the experts. You know, if you have a problem, talk to Louise, talk to me. I'm very happy to give you some advice about what you need to look at in these situations. I'd much rather you don't have a crisis at all than get into problems.